Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Winkler. I'm an attorney at Tucker Ellis and the chair of the CMBA's litigation section. I want to thank everyone for joining us for David Wojtek's presentation on effective technical demonstrations for all phases of litigation. And before we get to that presentation, I want to take the opportunity to let everyone know about some things to stay tuned for in this group over the next couple of months. First, please keep an eye on your email for details about the next section meeting. And second, we're excited to announce that we're working on a CLE with a panel of lawyers that have actually tried cases under various conditions and courtroom settings throughout the course of this pandemic. And we're going to moderate that panel. We're excited to bring that one to you. And then third, we're in the process of preparing a What Staff Attorneys Want You to Know presentation with more information to come soon. So we're looking forward to those things, and the CMBA litigation section is equally excited to bring this presentation to you. David Wojtek is president of Wojtek Studios, which specializes in custom interactive presentations. His presentation today is titled State-of-the-Art Presentations for Litigation, Mediation, Arbitration, and Trial. David has an impressive 25 years of experience in litigation support, having developed the first interactive multimedia presentations to be used as demonstrative evidence in a courtroom. In his years of experience, David has created trial graphics presentations for over 500 trials. And his presentation today touches on the use of modern presentation techniques, including the use of proportional time and fly-out screen clicks, as well as creating a non-linear presentation to break free of the traditional slideshow format. I hope you find the information as useful as I did.
Hello everyone, my name is David Wojtek. I'm president of Wojtek Studios, and for the past 25 years I've been developing cutting-edge presentations for just about every proceeding that there is. Let's begin with the idea that you're working on a case that will require you to be a bit of an educator regarding extensive, complicated, and sometimes abstract concepts. Let's also define the term interactive multimedia, since we'll be using this term throughout. Interactive media, also called interactive multimedia, is any computer-delivered electronic system that allows the user to control, combine, and manipulate different media types, such as text, sound, video, computer graphics, and animation. This is your jury. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is also your mediator, arbiter, opposing counsel, trial team, client, and your own trial team. It's basically everyone. Smartphones, user interface design, graphic design are literally defining the ways that people will ingest data. Take a moment after this presentation to appreciate the inspired design in your own devices. Yet, in the past 100 years, we have gone from this to a slideshow with too many words on it and not enough images, or an animation that you can only control by starting or stopping. With that in mind, let's have a look at modern presentation techniques available to attorneys and try to imagine the future of trial graphics. The presentation techniques that we're going to cover today are the use of proportional time, using a flyout on clicks, creating a non-linear presentation, the amount of flexibility and control that you can embed into your presentation, general ease of use for your operator, variable speed, the amount of time that it takes to go through the presentation. Feedback, forest for the trees, using builds, resonance, and allowing for live exhibit creation, and of course the save load option and the benefits of that. So let's take a look at proportional time. For this product recall case, which is split into 2014 and 2015, uses a calendar system along the bottom. And what you'll see is that each month takes up the exact same space on screen as does each day. So what you get is a nice system for visually understanding how much time has elapsed, or how little time elapsed, without actually having to calculate it in your head or think about it. And there's plenty of ways to do this. And just as a side note, you would see that this calendar system for 2015 is definitely proportional time, but then the actual entries for these dates are not proportional time. They're just evenly distributed across the screen. But you can see very quickly how much time has elapsed between each just by using the calendar system. This timeline takes it one step further. In this sliding menu you've got along the bottom, each day is actually represented as its own graphic, as its own block of space on the main chronology. And then you get this smaller main menu sort of version of the timeline to keep track of exactly where you're at in relationship to the bigger picture. This one breaks it down into year. You'll see each year takes up the same amount of time on space, or space on screen. And the same thing for this medical chronology. This one is actually broken down by hour. So you get, for each day, you've got 24 individual blocks for time. And then it's just a lot easier to relate to how much time has elapsed exactly. So it's an important thing to mention for scale is that you can go all the way down to, you can do it by month, you can go by hour, you can go by day, as long as it's proportional, as long as each section, each visually represented block of time is the same size. All right, so we just covered proportional time. So let's indicate that we've moved through that section. And let's talk a little bit about what a flyout is. You'll notice that your smartphone, your devices use this extensively. And what it means is that, let's just go to 2014. No, that one's open too. Okay, so let me close a few of these so that we get a better idea of what's going on. A flyout is simply anything that you click on that it rolls out another piece of artwork is a flyout. And the key to this is that when you want to learn about something, let's say it's a particular date, you click on it and something else flies out of it that helps you to push forward the understanding of what took place on that date. The next level of that would be to fly out the document that proves this statement. And of course, a true flyout would be something like this, where you click on it and the actual document flies right out of it and goes full screen. I guess technically that's a flyout too. Maybe it's just more of an enlargement. But I think you get the idea, which is if you want to learn about something, you click on it. And the statement behind the date or the document that proves the statement comes flying out from or behind what you just clicked on. Very effective technique for having everybody stay on target and stay focused on what they're supposed to be learning. And it's also just a very nice way to control the release of information. But I think we're going to get into that in more detail in just a little bit. Let's see some other examples of flyouts real quick. On a timeline like this, flyout's a bit more manual. But then you see that the documents are sort of a standard flyout. All right, proportional time, flyout are done. Let's keep going. All right, so let's talk about what it means to create a nonlinear presentation. Really all that means is that you have sort of moved past the linear presentation of, say, a slideshow, where you can only put up one screen at a time and you can only go forward or backwards. In a nonlinear presentation, you should be able to jump to wherever you want at any time, or put up sort of nonlinear versions of information just to isolate maybe two different entries. But the key is that you should be able to go from, say, one piece of information to another with a very minimal amount of clicks. Let's see another example. So this is still fairly linear, but it's fast enough that you can get around very, very quickly, and you can go forward or backwards. But again, it's not constrained by sort of a slide deck format. You should be able to go anywhere that you want and even compare certain sections or certain details from completely different parts of the presentation. So bottom line is that being nonlinear is just sort of breaking free of the slideshow format. Going nonlinear is completed. Let's talk about flexibility and control. Your presentation should have enough flexibility and control that it can create on-the-fly demonstrative visuals by setting up the screen any way that you want. So let's picture this product recall case where, let's say for opening, you sort of just fly through the key elements of the case. Not really getting into the documents behind them, just setting up the story. And then later on, let's say you have a witness on the stand, and you really just want to focus on June 13th, then you can do something like this, where this screen is set up, and it's ready for that particular witness. It still has some functionality left in it to zoom in and zoom back out of the document. And maybe you hit save, you save it so that particular point is ready to go. But for this witness, you bring up just this section, and that's really a good example of being flexible, but also being able to control everything that's on screen. You can do comparisons if you want to. That's a good example. I think you get the idea. It's your story. It's really the key elements of the case. So you should be able to get to anything that you want quickly and set up the screen any way that you like, any way that's most effective for displaying the information that you want to communicate at that time. Here's another example. You can, of course, you could open all these entries for this medical chronology, but you don't have to. You could just have one or two of them open, and that's fine. Or you could have just one piece of information open plus its document, and you can start to overlay some other information on top of that, either combined or as individual graphics. Whatever way works best for that particular time, being that opening, closing, witnesses, rebuttal, just fully using the power behind your demonstrative presentation to get your points across. Flexibility and control. All right, next up is ease of use. So let's pick a sample here. Ease of use generally speaks towards how easy it is for you to run a presentation or your operator to run the presentation. So it should be intuitive, it should have large buttons, it should provide rollovers for buttons so that you know when you click on them. It should generally have single click actions, so a single click to open and a single click on a clearly indicated button to close. And then what you can go with is a double click for an alternate that doesn't necessarily have a on-screen interface button to show you what's next. In this sample, there's a simple double click action embedded in for each document that allows it to enlarge on a double click. And then if it's at the 200% of its normal size and you double click on it again, it goes back to 100% size. So ease of use is exactly what it means. It should be very easy to use, share, communicate, get people up to speed on how to use it. And then ease of use, the fluid nature of using it, should be a benefit to your audience, also your jury or your mediator, as that'll translate over to them as a way of more easily understanding the content. And we can have a look at other samples too. Ease of use in this case would be this simplified, highly simplified menu along the bottom. So play, pause, stabilize on, stabilize off, map on, map off, increasing the audio levels. And then these buttons will take you to specific points along this video. And I think when you click on this, it's fairly simple to understand what we're talking about with this magnifying glass. And again, a single click to open it. And in this case, the double click comes in to close it. Let's just pause this. And that is ease of use. Let's have a look at variable speed and what that means for an interactive demonstrative presentation. Generally, all it means is that you should be able to move through your presentation in its entirety or just parts of it at any speed that you want. Really, the best example to put into place for this particular explanation would be, let's say you went through this extensive chronology for opening just very quickly and easily and fluidly, but without opening up any of the documents associated with these statements. So you get the overall picture laid out for opening, but then you have the option later on to go back and get into specific documents that prove each statement that you've pulled up during opening. So it's just a way of saying, it's sort of like that old school version of ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will prove to you through provided evidence these facts. So for opening and maybe even closing, you just go through it, very quickly. And then you get into, actually proving each statement via documents and evidence and expert witnesses. So that would be a really good way of showing off variable speed. It's pretty easy to tell in a more simplistic chronology like this, where you could see this would be opening, and then let's say this would be for a particular witness or rebuttal. So that you've got full control over how quickly you're going through this information. It also ties back into having a non-linear presentation and ease of use. But I think you get the idea. It's how much do you want to release at any particular point, information-wise, entry-wise, for educating your jury or mediator. And also, of course, the amount of time that you have to work with. I wonder what other examples we can show that. This isn't bad. As an example, you could play the entirety of this body cam video if you wanted to, and that would take a very long time. Or you can go to these predefined sections that cover very specific activities, or you can jump right to particular points. In this case, when shots were fired. Shots fired 3, 4, vehicle's weapon, and of course you can pause, play, go back and forth, get into specifics if you have to, but the idea is that you can either play it in a linear fashion or jump around inside of it in a non-linear fashion, and of course have full control over the speed at which you're moving through information. And the same rule applies for, say, a construction case. You can go through these individual years, or these aerial photographs were collected at a very rapid speed to show sort of a time-lapse effect. Or of course, if you needed to stop and cover highly specific, let's say, developments in this construction, you could. And that is variable speed. Okay, so what is feedback exactly? Feedback could be any visual indicator that helps you understand what you're supposed to look at or what you just clicked on. Anything in that sort of area. So this would be an example of feedback right here, this rollover. I particularly like using indicators for exactly what you'd click on to say, hey, you should be looking at this right here. So in this case, there is a graphic that appears on the mouse down. If you listen for the click, click. And then when you release, there's another one. So that you really get an idea of where you just clicked, which can be very helpful for having people pay attention to your presentation and to pay attention to what you just clicked on, because it's probably going to open up something else that they needed to pay attention to. And then a double click looks just like that too. So let's see some examples of feedback. Again, this rollover. This fly-in is considered a bit of feedback too. The clock ticking away. Rollovers on the flags. This one's kind of fun because it's got, if the red flag entry is open, In this case, it's some nurse's notes. The actual flag starts waving, which I thought was kind of nice. More rollovers up here. Flyouts. Okay. Law enforcement's got some nice rollovers just to let you know where you're at. Always part of the main menu. So generally, if you have something dynamically happening on screen in association with clicks, that's a good thing. Helps people pay attention, helps people know what they're supposed to be looking at. You're just helping them out a little bit. This one's quite pronounced. The feedback is the enlargement of these blocks. It's just a way of saying, hey, look right here, look at this thing. This is what I want you to be focusing on. And that is feedback. So we're all familiar with the term forest for the trees. It's sort of a very common term that says, you know, don't lose track of the big picture by focusing too much on the little picture of the granular details inside of it. And I also think the other way around too, where you know, don't lose track of the big picture for the small and the small picture inside of the big. And that's pretty important for litigation, considering it's really a sort of hurdle that you have to get over in storytelling a little bit, because you've got a lot of granular detail, but the key is the overall picture. So you want to have your presentation deal with that as much as possible. And in this case, what you've got is the proportional time calendars that you see, and then the actual entries are linked to specific date entries. And that's a really good way of showing your entries one after another, which is important, but also to show how much proportional times elapse through between each entry, which is very good. And you can even take it one step further with a presentation like this. And what you've got in this sliding main menu along the bottom here, you can see this indicator. You actually, when you land right on a particular date, it should align quite nicely with this little arrowhead for this, so you know exactly what date you're on. But the key being that in the forest for the trees menu is that you can actually see. So like, let's take a look at October. We've got company A, company C working together on this day, and then an entry just for company C right next to it. So let's take a look. So here we've got company C and company A, right? And that's just a way of keeping track of the big picture while getting really down into the details, which can be incredibly helpful, especially for litigation and trial. Because that way they're not just remembering this picture. They're remembering this picture in relationship to everything else. Forest for the trees. All right, so next up is the build, or what it is to use builds. in your presentation. I think a common issue that litigators, trial attorneys face when putting together presentations is that you have so much information that you try to organize it on screen so that it's easier to communicate, but at the same time it has the ability to become busy very quickly. So the only thing that using builds appropriately really means is that you want to sort of build your screen for whatever part of trial or mediation you're actually going to be using it for. And this speaks a lot towards variable use and control, flexibility and control. But at the same time, what you're looking to achieve basically is a nice balance between being too busy and keeping it clean, and also controlling the release of information so that people aren't getting anything too soon or reading ahead. That all sort of plays into it. And just really having these nice nonlinear options to simplify or build up your screen as much as you'd like. So you see that in this example quite extensively. A lot of people would think that maybe this is a little too busy, right? Let's say we just jumped right into the screen and it looked like this. In fact, I'll reset it for you in a second. So let's say you went from this, which is quite clean and very simple, and you understand what's going on, and suddenly you're in this. Now, this in and of itself is not a particularly bad thing, but I think what you should remember is that it's more important to construct the actual screen right in front of everyone, also known as a build, so that even though you've got multiple elements up on screen, they have been in a very controlled manner brought to the attention of your audience, and then they sort of get a forest for the trees sort of build of it also. And suddenly what was incredibly busy is now just a very controlled explanation of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 different entries. So that covers builds. Very important for when you're getting into a lot of information. You just want to remember to build it up on screen. Don't just put all up there at once. Build it up so that the first entry relates to the second entry and the third entry, and it's just a nice way to keep it all visually organized for everyone. Next is resonance. So let's talk about that. Best way to explain resonance is any graphical changes or transitions that you make to your presentation that simply help your jury or your mediator remember something. It's sort of like enhancing those aha moments that you might get when telling the story of your trial. In this case, in this product recall presentation, it's best explained using these small icon buttons here. So we can light up when the actual fires took place at. We can show these blocks of elapsed time for different time ranges. And it's really just anything that says, okay, this is what brings it all together. Now I understand the importance of most of the telling of this story so far. So how does it bring it all together? How does it summarize it? And how do you take that and make sure that it sticks firmly into the memories of your jury? Good example for that would be in this medical presentation. For the critical part of time between these two entries, you get this very large red band in regards to these medical scans that took place. And then even further, you can set up the screen. You could put an image of this particular doctor that waited on performing this particular scan, caused an 8-hour delay. And with setting up the screen like that, what you get is your aha moment, your resonance that you want for your jurors to take with them back to deliberation. And that, in summary, is resonance and how to best use it in your presentations. Allow for live exhibit creation. What does that mean exactly? So, one of the important things to remember when working with demonstrative presentations is that they're still considered demonstrative aids, which means that they're not going to be allowed to go back into the jury room for deliberation. But a lot like drawing on a chalkboard or a whiteboard and then taking a picture of it and submitting that as an exhibit, there's a workaround for allowing your jury to have as many different still screens as they want for use in deliberation. So what you want to do is just add a button that essentially screen captures whatever is on screen at that particular time. And you can even add in your own exhibit number if you want to. So let's say this is exhibit 01 EX01. And then when you're ready to take the picture, it will download it to your downloads folder as a JPEG. And then you can collect those JPEGs that you've done screen captures of and print them out, provide them to your jury if you want to, or if you have a lot of just purely digital work being provided to the jury, then it can just be provide them on a flash drive. But either way, since they're not going to be able to get their hands on the actual presentation, maybe the next best thing is to just add a button for creating individual exhibits of individual screens. And you should really consider embedding that functionality into all your presentations, just so that you have the ability to do so if you want to. Maybe you don't get into it, maybe you don't need to, but you should probably have the option there, just in case you want to be able to use it. And that is live exhibit creation. All right, so the save load option, what does that mean? Do you want to have that particular functionality in your presentation? I would say you absolutely do. I've got a load and a save button right here at the top right of this particular presentation. So let's click this, that means we just saved this particular state here. And then let's let's roll back to the beginning and let's get this bubble out of the way. We'll put one here. We'll put one, actually just knock that one out of the way. We'll put this here. Yeah, let's get rid of it. Doesn't matter. And we're going to say state-of-the-art presentations for litigation, mediation, arbitration, and trial. All right. Now, what if we want to go back to where we hit the save button? You just hit the load button, and it jumps right back to that point. So you can picture using that even more extensively than just a couple of buttons. You could have multiple buttons you could have a button for different witnesses. you could set them up any way that you want, really. I think a good way to show that off would be in the save load function of this more advanced timeline, where if you load it, all of the entries are down, except for this guy. And then let's say you set up the screen just the way that you want it, with, let's say, these particular entries. And we'll even open up a couple documents here, maybe one document. All right. And then we hit save. Or maybe there's like 10 save slots up here, and this is save 01 for expert witness Smith. So then if we go anywhere else and do something else and start talking about different sections and going through different evidence, but we know we want, then it's time for expert Smith to get on the stand, then we just hit that button for him and you jump right back to the saved state for that particular witness. Or if you're moving through something that's as large as a timeline like this and you break for the day, hit the save button. Then when you come back the next day, you can go right back to where you were at, which was right there. So a very important, very powerful piece of functionality for your presentations. Save load option. So that closes out modern presentation techniques. And just try to keep in mind going forward as you start to produce some of your own presentations that these are essentially just tools that can be used and combined in any way that you like in order to get the most impact, presentation value, ease of use, resonance for your presentation, so that if you have a complicated story to tell at trial or at mediation, that everybody's getting it, understanding it, retaining the information without having to think about it too much. It's just really leveraging the current state of graphic design and interface design to help educate your jury at as fast as possible and as easy as possible. Next up is Richard E. Mayer. According to Wikipedia, Richard E. Mayer, born 1947, is an American educational psychologist who has made significant contributions to theories of cognition and learning, especially as they relate to problem solving and the design of educational multimedia. Mayer's best-known contribution in the field of educational psychology is multimedia learning theory, which states that optimal learning occurs when visual and verbal material are presented together simultaneously. He is the year 2000 recipient of the E.L. Thorndike Award for Career Achievement in Educational Psychology and the winner of the 2008 Distinguished Contribution of Applications of Psychology to Education and the Training Award from the American Psychological Association. So basically, if I needed to hire an expert witness to help me define some of the decisions that I'm making, this would be the guy that I would go to. And really, the key to what I've taken from Richard Mayer's studies is Mayer's 12 Principles of Multimedia Learning. And this has really helped me a lot in my developing my design processes for presentations. But after really getting my head wrapped around these 12 principles, I noticed that anybody that's tried to develop a presentation specifically for trial will start to realize that some of these items start to sound like common sense very quickly. but according to Dr. Mayer, he's got all sorts of proof to back up these statements that that everybody would think is just common sense when putting together a presentation like this. So let's have a look at these. First up is the coherence principle. People learn better when extraneous words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. Also known as the KISS rule, which is keep it super simple. Signaling principle. People learn better when cues that highlight the organization of the essential material are added. That makes a lot of sense. A simple version of this would be just rollovers, something like that, which we already covered. And a bit more advanced would be maybe you've got a player's board of all the members of a particular company that are on screen as a way to help the jury organize it in their heads. And not only that, maybe that particular hierarchy is actually part of the main menu or something like that, where you can always have access to it. Redundancy principle. People learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and on-screen text. That makes a lot of sense. So essentially, if you want to have people read text, that's fine. Give them a chance to actually read it themselves instead of you reading it for them. And when not necessary, don't include it. Back to coherence principle, which is keep it nice and simple. Spatial continuity principle. People learn better when corresponding words and pictures are presented near rather than far from each other on page or screen. So let's say you've got a document that is small enough on screen that you can't read it, but then it's got an enlarged blowout, and you actually want to take that enlarged paragraph and have it be right next to the original image of the document so that people know that it came right from that document. Temporal continuity principle. People learn better when corresponding words and pictures are presented simultaneously rather than successively. So that really, to me, speaks directly towards being linear or nonlinear. So if you want to have a slideshow, it would be successive graphics one after another, and nonlinear would be more at the same time, but maybe scrolling through a zoomed in view of the whole picture. Segmenting principle. People learn better from a multimedia lesson is presented in user-paced segments rather than as a continuous unit. That speaks directly towards using the build technique, where you want to build up your screen and then keep everybody sort of engaged with exactly where you're at with a rollover, right? Pre-training principle. People learn better from a multimedia lesson when they know the names and characteristics of the main concepts. That could be as simple as keeping all of your main concepts right underneath the title of what they are, and it could be increased in complexity from there. But the main concepts should try to be embedded in your main menu as much as possible. So this is the main menu for this presentation here, and we're in this section. So you want to always relate back to the main overall lesson and then get into details. Modality principle. People learn better from graphics and narration than from animation and on-screen text. So what does that mean exactly? There's nothing wrong with having graphics on screen and then you narrating the explanation behind those graphics. But sometimes it's not necessary to have the text that you're narrating up on the screen at the same time. Let people absorb the information visually from the graphics, and then you provide the foundation in the narration. Multimedia principle. People learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. That's pretty straightforward. You know, people are visual, very visual learners, and just visual in general. So learning better from graphics than words is very relatable. Personalization principle. People learn better from multimedia lessons when words are in conversational style rather than informal style. So as this relates directly to trial attorneys, and you've probably picked this up already, I imagine, is that though the courtroom's a very sort of professional level environment, that there's nothing wrong with using a conversational style with your jurors if you're at a jury trial, just as a way to relate to them better. Voice principle. People learn better when the narration in multimedia lessons is spoken a friendly human voice rather than a machine voice. And probably the one lesson here from Dr. Mayer that doesn't relate that much to trial work, because you're probably not going to have a machine voiceover do your narration. It's always going to be yourself. It just relates to how trial attorneys put on trials. You know, you're up at the podium and you're doing opening and you're examining witnesses. Image principle. People do not necessarily learn better from a multimedia lesson when the speaker's image is added to the screen. So this one speaks directly towards really virtual trials, I think, is the best way to put this one into perspective from in 2020, is that let's say you're projecting a presentation like this out over Zoom and your individual juries are in their home and they're looking at it. There's no reason to have your own a video shot of yourself on screen at the same time. Now, the flip side of that coin is that you're definitely going to want to have it for any of your witnesses. So let's say this was the particular screen that you had up at the time that's being pushed through Zoom to your individual jurors. You're definitely going to want to have your witness and somewhere on screen the shot of their face, so that the jury can get a read for their body language and how they react to questions. But you don't necessarily have to have your own up there the whole time, your own image. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. I truly hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you take away from it that there is a far greater range of functionality and interface design, influence, and engagement and resonance and memorability that can be added to your presentation by simply going to something that's a bit more interactive and has a bit more multimedia in it. Think of it as a slideshow that you might put together for opening statements, but just really maxed out on its functionality and its influence. That really just the best presentation that you can bring to bear for your advocacy for your client. And with that, if you'd like to know more about the use of interactive multimedia in the courtroom, feel free to go to this website and leave me a note, and I'd be happy to get back to you. Consultations are free. And again, my name is David Wojtek, president of Wojtek Studios, and thank you for watching.